and welcome to World Talks. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. According to a senior White House official, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed on a meeting to discuss an end to the war in Ukraine. Now, the talks are scheduled to take place on Friday, August 15 in Alaska, the U.S. state closest to Russia. Now, joining me now to break it down is Oleksandr Merezhko, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Oleksandr, so happy to have you with us here on World Talks today. Now, tell me, Oleksandr, what do you think are the terms on the table? What can we expect here?
Well, it's really hard to say what is on the table for these negotiations, but it's very worrisome that President of Ukraine doesn't participate in these talks, because from my perspective, it more and more reminds us of Munich 1938. And of course, there are grave concerns on Ukrainian part that United States and Kremlin dictator might discuss the future of Ukraine, our fate, and decide it without our participation.
But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, initially we heard Trump say, or his administration, that there was supposed to be a meeting with both Putin and Zelensky, and now this is shifting. And now, from what you're just saying or confirming, Zelensky doesn't seem to be having a seat at the table. What changed? How can this actually be possible? Like you said, having a deal without the Ukrainian president at the table.
The previous administration of President Biden had strictly followed the principle, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. But unfortunately, under President Trump, we have different situation, and it's very disturbing for us. Of course, unfortunately, President Trump is not always consistent, because he had, if I'm not mistaken, around 5 previously, he had ceasefire proposals or ultimatums, if you will, but he never followed through, because he promised, in case of Putin doesn't agree with his ceasefire proposal, he will he will implement serious sanctions, including secondary sanctions. But unfortunately, President Trump doesn't keep his word.
So you think now that Russia is actually buying out and playing for time to avoid these sanctions?
Exactly. This is the whole idea, because Putin is not interested in peace or ceasefire for him. Even ceasefire, which allows Ukraine to survive as a state, means political and maybe even physical death. He cannot back down. He can only double down. But at the same time, he needs to pretend to create illusion of sort of talks or negotiations in order to avoid sanctions, which can be imposed by the United States.
All right, Oleksandr. President Putin reportedly offered to stop the war in exchange for Ukraine's eastern regions. And I mean, do you think for the ceasefire to take place, Ukraine is going to have to make territorial concessions? I mean, I know we've heard President Zelensky say that this is not possible, that Ukraine won't agree to this. But then how will the scenario unfold in this case?
Well, first of all, of course, President Zelensky was very clear about this, that it's impossible from the perspective of our constitution, from the perspective of international law, and politically speaking, it's also impossible to make any territorial concessions. And it's not only about Ukraine, it's about the whole global security, because when you don't punish but reward aggressor for the act of aggression, for military occupation, you're ruining the whole world order. That's why it's absolutely out of question. The solution could be exactly what President Trump had offered before, which means unconditional ceasefire. Only having unconditional ceasefire, we can start serious negotiations.
So you're saying unconditional ceasefire. Again, please do give us the details. What do you think that Ukraine wants to agree to, that also we would have Russia say, okay, then we're ready for this?
Well, first of all, there is absolutely no indication that Putin wants such unconditional ceasefire. What he actually does and says, it's a mockery, actually, of any President Trump's proposals, ceasefire proposals. Putin says, yes, but, and then he adds his ultimatum, which is absolutely unacceptable. And again, the first step to any negotiations, and the burden of proof is now on Putin. He should prove to Trump, to the whole world, that he's serious about holding talks in earnest. To do that, he just needs to stop bombing Ukraine and, well, to show his will to start negotiations. But again, he is not going to do it because he's obsessed with the goal to subjugate and to destroy Ukraine as a state.
Oleksandr, let me ask you this, but does Ukraine have a leverage to not have to give up land?
Well, our best leverage is, of course, our army. It's our only reliable tool to defend ourselves. And luckily, we have support, military assistance and support and material, financial support from our closest allies in Europe, including Poland, of course. But we need more support from the United States. The only way to deal with Putin, and it's not negotiations, it's only maximum pressure put upon Putin. To do that, we need, first of all, we need contemporary weaponry, including air defense systems and long-range missiles from the United States. And we need more sanctions. We need to stop Russian war machine. To do that, we need to deny revenues for Russia, which it receives by selling in huge quantities its gas and oil to such countries as India, as China, as Brazil and Turkey.
How do you think that Europe could chip in when it comes to taking part in these negotiations?
I'm absolutely confident that European leaders should participate in any negotiations for a number of reasons. First of all, Ukraine already has a status of candidate to join the European Union. So it means that representatives of the EU should participate in these negotiations. Additionally, it would create participation of European leaders, would create additional guarantee of our security during the process of negotiations, because you never know with President Trump, he's not always consistent, unfortunately, and who knows, maybe during the process of negotiations, he can be tempted to align with Putin. To prevent it from happening, we need participation of our European allies.
But right now, Oleksandr, I mean, to cut you off, from what I have here, the bilateral talks won't be involving any representatives from the EU. Has anything changed, or is there any further details that you can give us?
Well, first of all, such bilateral talks is a huge mistake if there is no Ukraine and no European leaders. But I do hope that we still have enough time till 15th of August for the common sense to prevail. And I hope that President Trump can change his stance on that issue, and he can get involved or engage Ukraine and European leaders for the process of negotiations. But to do that, we need together, through our common efforts, to persuade President Trump to follow this path.
And you just pointed that out again, that you believe that without Europe, a seat for Europeans there or European countries there and Ukraine there, that, I mean, these talks shouldn't be happening. But let me ask you this. Why do you think that Trump changed his mind that Zelensky shouldn't be at this meeting anymore with Putin suddenly, that it shouldn't be a condition of talks anymore?
Well, it's hard to say because we can see only the tip of the iceberg and we don't see what's going on behind the scenes. We don't see what kind of events take place in the so-called through the back channel between Washington and Moscow. We don't see that. Maybe some kind of preliminary agreements were reached due to, for example, Trump's envoy Witkoff. But unfortunately, the events is not going in the best possible direction. But we still have time to change it. We need to have more resolve, and we need to insist on changing the things and getting involved Ukraine and European partners in the negotiation process.
Let me ask you this. What kind of peacekeeping forces would have to be arranged, considered, if a ceasefire agreement actually materialized?
Well, unfortunately, it's too early to talk about any peacekeeping forces, because it can be done only when there is at least ceasefire agreement, and when these forces from different countries, they would feel safe enough, would have enough security. So it's early to talk about this, but again, it might be a next step. But first of all, we don't even have serious negotiations at the moment.
All right, and again, I mean, if it comes out that, for instance, on the 15th of August, so we're a week away from that, we're in Alaska. Here we have a trip between Putin and Trump sitting together and discussing territorial concessions. So depending on what they agree to, how should you think Ukraine respond? Let's say I'm giving you the worst case scenario where Trump comes out and says, well, Ukraine has to give up these territories.
Well, theoretically speaking, President Trump and Putin, they can reach any deal, any kind of deal or agreement which goes against the interests of Ukraine. They can do it, yes, but the problem is that they cannot impose it on Ukrainian people. They cannot impose on our president, on the Verkhovna Rada, on our army, because we have proved many times that Ukrainians are not the kind of people who would easily agree to any kind of deals or agreements which undermine our sovereignty and our territorial integrity.
What are, you did mention, Ukraine, but let me ask you this. What about ordinary people with everything that's happening? I mean, just about a couple of days ago, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk mentioned something about the possibility of the conflict finally freezing, right? And there to be a pause in this conflict. But what are ordinary Ukrainians saying? I mean, what do they want? Are they willing to, say, well, if we give away these, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, don't mark my words as an attack, but I mean, what if, if this is what it's going to take for Russia to stop bombarding and killing Ukrainian civilians and children? Let's not talk about the children that Russia has kidnapped and forcefully trafficking online on their adoption websites. Wouldn't Ukrainian citizens, agree to that, or wouldn't Ukraine agree to that?
Well, of course, it's really hard to wage a war, to defensive war against the aggressor like Russia, who is brutal, and the war has been continuing for more than 3 years. You can imagine how difficult it is for our people to continue to fight. But the thing is that we can have two kinds of ceasefire, for example, and many Ukrainians would like to have true, real ceasefire, but ceasefire which gives us guarantees of our survival and our security. This is one story. Yes, we could discuss that and we could agree to such ceasefire, but Putin is up to different kinds of ceasefire which would allow him to destroy us as a nation, to erase us from the political map of the world. And we cannot agree to this kind of delayed death or ceasefire which would ruin us in the future and destroy us as a nation. And in this situation, no matter how tired we are, no matter how difficult it is for us, but we'll be fighting for our life and our survival just because we don't have any other option. Death is not an option for us.
Oleksandr, this is something very similar that some Armenians have come out as saying after yesterday's meeting between Azerbaijan and Armenia, also being at the Washington and reportedly signing to what Trump calls a peace deal and a ceasefire. Thank you so much for breaking it down for us. Oleksandr Merezhko, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.